I watched my parents gift my brother a check for $35,000 at his graduation dinner, money stolen directly from my savings account. What they didn't realize was that by dessert, the bank manager would arrive with evidence so devastating it would shatter our family's foundation forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The ivory linen tablecloths at Bellini's Italian restaurant gleamed under the soft amber lighting, creating the perfect backdrop for what my parents had billed as a special celebration for my brother Noah's MBA graduation. My mother, Diana, had spent the afternoon getting her hair done at her favorite salon, while my father, Robert, had broken out his prized Rolex, the one reserved exclusively for milestone moments. I smoothed down the navy blue dress I'd bought specially for the occasion, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. 3 days had passed since I'd discovered the truth. 72 hours of silent fury as I methodically gathered evidence, made calls, and prepared for this moment. To anyone observing our table, mother, father, golden son, and dutiful daughter, we looked like the perfect family celebrating a perfect achievement. "A toast," my father announced, raising his glass of 20-year-old scotch, his voice carrying that special warmth he reserved exclusively for Noah. "To my son, who makes me prouder every day. Harvard Business School graduate, and now, thanks to a little help from us, soon to be founder of his own tech company." My mother beamed, her diamond earrings catching the light as she leaned over to squeeze Noah's hand. "We always knew you were destined for greatness, sweetheart." I raised my glass mechanically, the Chardonnay inside untouched. 3 years of working double shifts as a hospital nurse while living in a cramped studio apartment, saving every penny for the down payment on my dream home. 3 years of meticulous budgeting, of declining vacations and nights out, of watching my savings slowly grow to $35,427.86, all erased with a single unauthorized transfer. "We have a special surprise for you, Noah," my mother continued, practically vibrating with excitement as she handed him an envelope with a red bow. "Your father and I know how much startup capital matters, so we've decided to give you a little boost." Noah opened the envelope, his eyes widening at the check inside. $35,000? Mom? Dad? This is incredible. "You deserve every penny," my father said, clapping him on the shoulder. "We've always believed in investing in your future." I took a sip of water, my hand steady despite the rage bubbling beneath my carefully composed exterior. What my parents failed to mention was that their investment had come directly from my savings account, the one they'd insisted on keeping as a joint account when I was 18, just in case of emergencies. The account I'd been planning to remove them from next week once I'd finalized the paperwork on my condo. "Vanessa, isn't it wonderful?" My mother turned to me, her practiced smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Your brother is finally going to launch his business idea." "Wonderful," I echoed, my voice neutral as I cut into my untouched salmon. The same business idea that had failed twice before, each time with my parents bailing him out while I received lectures about financial responsibility whenever I so much as mentioned wanting new scrubs for work. Noah launched into an enthusiastic explanation of his revolutionary app concept, something about social media optimization that sounded suspiciously similar to his last failed venture. My father nodded along, enraptured as always by his son's promises of tech industry domination. My mother occasionally interjected with questions designed solely to showcase Noah's supposed brilliance. Neither of them noticed that I hadn't touched my food, or that the folder beside my purse wasn't a graduation card, but rather contained copies of bank statements, transfer records, and a carefully documented timeline of theft. "Remember when Noah won that coding competition in high school?" My father reminisced, his face glowing with pride. The principal said he'd never seen such natural talent. "And now he'll be the next tech billionaire," my mother added, reaching over to straighten Noah's tie affectionately. I thought about the conversation I'd had with Mr. Harrington, the bank manager, just yesterday. His face had morphed from polite professional interest to shocked disbelief as I'd presented my evidence. "This is highly irregular, Ms. Reynolds," he'd said, reviewing the documentation of the unauthorized transfer. "And you're certain you didn't approve this?" "Positive," I'd replied, sliding across the signed affidavit. "I was working a 12-hour shift in the ICU when this transfer was initiated. Here's my hospital time card to prove it." Back at the restaurant, the waiter appeared to take our orders for dessert. My father, loosened by scotch and paternal pride, was becoming increasingly effusive. "You know, I always told Diana that Noah had that special something. Even as a kid, you could just tell he was going to make it big." My mother nodded in emphatic agreement. "Remember how we used most of our vacation fund for his first startup attempt? I knew it didn't work out, but that's how these things go. You have to fail before you succeed." "And now with this new capital," my father continued, patting the envelope containing my money, "he's ready for the big leagues." I thought about my own achievements, graduating top of my nursing class, being promoted to charge nurse after just 2 years, the lives I'd helped save during countless night shifts. Achievements that were acknowledged with cursory, "That's nice, dear," responses, if acknowledged at all. "You've always been our smart investor, Robert," my mother said, touching my father's arm admiringly. "Always knowing where to put our resources for the best return." Noah, to his credit, at least had the decency to ask, "Where did you guys come up with this kind of money? This is a lot more than you've helped with before." My father waved dismissively. "We've been putting a little aside. Nothing for you to worry about." I watched my mother's eyes flicker toward me for a split second, the only tell in her otherwise perfect performance. She knew. She'd always known exactly where the money had come from. The waiter returned with our desserts: tiramisu for my parents, chocolate lava cake for Noah, and the panna cotta I'd ordered but had no intention of eating. As he placed the dishes on the table, I noticed Mr. Harrington enter the restaurant, right on schedule, making his way toward our table. The bank manager's face was grim, his posture stiff as he carried a folder identical to the one beside my purse. My father was mid-sentence describing how Noah's business would revolutionize social media marketing when he noticed the man approaching our table. "Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds?" the bank manager asked, though it wasn't really a question. "I'm Martin Harrington, manager at First National. I believe we need to have a conversation about some irregularities with your daughter's accounts." The color drained from my father's face. My mother's hand froze with her spoon halfway to her mouth. Noah looked confused, glancing between our parents and the stern-faced banker. "I'm not sure what this is about," my father began, his authoritative voice now carrying a slight tremor. I reached for my own folder, placing it on the table beside my untouched dessert. "I think you do, Dad. I think you know exactly what this is about." The moment I'd been planning for 3 days had arrived. As my parents' faces transformed from confusion to dawning horror, I kept my expression perfectly composed, just as I did when delivering difficult news to patients' families. The difference was that this time, I felt no sympathy for the people about to receive the devastating information. "Perhaps," I said, opening my folder with steady hands, "we should start with the unauthorized transfer of $35,000 from my personal savings account last Friday at 2:17 p.m., exactly when I was assisting in an emergency thoracotomy at Memorial Hospital." The restaurant's ambient noise seemed to fade away as I laid the first bank statement on the table, followed by my hospital time card, my voice remaining calm and clinical as I began methodically presenting the evidence of my parents' betrayal. "What exactly are you implying, Vanessa?" my father demanded, his voice dropping to that dangerous low register I'd known since childhood. the tone that preceded his most severe disappointments in me. Mr. Harrington remained standing, his presence lending official weight to my accusations. Mrs. Reynolds, Mr. Reynolds, I've been managing your family's accounts for over 15 years, which is why your daughter's evidence was particularly concerning to me. My mother recovered first, her social graces kicking in like muscle memory. There must be some misunderstanding, she said, her voice honeyed with the charm that had made her president of the hospital auxiliary board 3 years running. We're Vanessa's parents. We were simply moving funds to help both our children. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The restaurant's ambient noise continued around us. The clink of silverware, soft conversation, waiters moving efficiently between tables, creating a bizarre contrast to the implosion happening at our table. None of the other diners could possibly guess that they were witnessing the calculated dismantling of a family's carefully constructed facade. I thought back to my earliest memories of growing up in the Reynolds household, the sprawling Tudor, in Oak Ridge Heights with its manicured lawn and color-coordinated interior that my mother refreshed seasonally. From the outside, we were the definition of suburban success. Father a financial advisor, mother a dedicated community volunteer, son a brilliant student, daughter. Well, I was the reliable one, the responsible one. The one who never quite measured up to my brother's supposed genius. Your signature is on the transfer authorization, Dad, I said, sliding across the document with his familiar scrawl at the bottom. Dated last Friday at 2:17 p.m., when you knew I would be at work. Noah looked genuinely confused, glancing between our parents and me. Wait, what's happening? Where did this money actually come from? I turned to my brother, studying his face for any sign of complicity. Oddly, I found none. For all his faults, the entitlement, the repeated failures glossed over with excuses, the casual acceptance of our parents' favoritism, it seemed he truly hadn't known. The money, I said evenly, came from my personal savings account. The one I've been building for 3 years for a down payment on a condo. The one that, as of last Thursday night, contained $35,427.86, right down to the last penny I've saved working overtime and holiday shifts at Memorial. Noah's expression shifted from confusion to dawning horror. Mom? Dad? You said this was from your investment portfolio. My mother's perfectly manicured hand fluttered dismissively. It's all family money, Noah. We've always supported both, our children as needed. Vanessa doesn't need a condo right now. It's a terrible investment in this market anyway. As needed, I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue. I pulled out another document from my folder, this one a spreadsheet, I'd created after hours of painstaking review of family financial records. Let me show you what as needed has looked like over the years, Noah. The spreadsheet detailed every major financial expenditure my parents had made for each of us since we'd turned 18. Noah's column included his full ride to Dartmouth, supplemented with a generous living allowance, a new car for graduation, rent for his apartment in Cambridge during business school, and startup capital for his 2 previous failed business ventures. Total, $192,456. My column showed my community college nursing program, mostly covered by scholarships I'd earned myself, a used Toyota I'd paid half for, and a small loan when my previous car needed major repairs, which I'd repaid in full, with interest. Total, $23,190. This doesn't even include the multiple times they've covered your rent when you forgot to pay it, or the credit card bills they've paid off, or the 3 vacations they've funded, I continued. I've actually been quite conservative in my calculations. Noah had the decency to look embarrassed. My father's face was turning an alarming shade of red, while my mother maintained her frozen smile, though her eyes had hardened to flint. Families support each other differently based on needs and opportunities, my father stated, his financial advisor voice taking over. The same reasonable tone he used with clients when explaining why their investments had underperformed. Noah's education and businesses required more capital investment. Your nursing career was more straightforward. I laughed then, a short, harsh sound that caused heads to turn at nearby tables. My straightforward nursing career where I work 70-hour weeks in the ICU? Where I've held the hands of dying patients because their families couldn't bear to be present? That career? Mr. Harrington cleared his throat. If I may, the issue at hand isn't about different levels of familial support. It's about an unauthorized transfer from an account where Ms. Reynolds is the primary holder, but which you maintained joint access to. Access that was established when she was a minor. The waiter approached our table, sensed the tension, and wisely retreated without asking if we needed anything else. My mother leaned forward, lowering her voice. Vanessa, whatever point you're trying to make, this is hardly the appropriate venue. We can discuss this at home like adults. Like we'd discussed things when I'd wanted to apply to Johns Hopkins for nursing instead of staying local where I could help out with family obligations. Like we'd discussed my decision to take the charge nurse position that required weekend shifts, making me unavailable to attend my mother's Sunday brunches. The Reynolds family didn't discuss. They dictated, and I was expected to comply. I tried discussing things with you, I replied calmly. 3 months ago, when I told you. I was saving for a down payment. 2 months ago when I showed you the condo listings I was considering. 6 weeks ago, when I specifically mentioned I was close to my savings goal and would be making changes to my accounts. I pulled out my phone, opening the text message thread with my mother. Here's your response when I told you I'd found a condo I loved. That's nice, dear, but don't rush into anything. Real estate is Noah's area of expertise. Wait until he's finished with his MBA to make any decisions. Noah shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I don't know anything about real estate, he muttered. No, you don't, I agreed. You took exactly 1 elective on venture capital real estate during your first year, dropped it after 3 weeks, and somehow that translated to you being the family authority on my housing decisions. My father attempted to regain control of the situation. Mr. Harrington, while I appreciate your concern, this is clearly a family misunderstanding. I'm sure we can sort this out without involving the bank. The bank manager's expression remained unmoved. Mr. Reynolds, as I explained to your daughter yesterday, this type of transaction raises several regulatory flags. As a financial advisor yourself, you should be well aware of the implications. I watched my father's professional mask slip further. Robert Reynolds, respected financial advisor, had built his entire career on his reputation for ethical management of client funds. The irony that he'd stolen from his own daughter wasn't lost on me. Dad forged my signature, I said, addressing Mr. Harrington while keeping my eyes fixed on my father. I never authorized the transfer, never approved the withdrawal, and was physically present at Memorial Hospital during the exact time the transaction occurred. My father's jaw tightened. We are still your parents, Vanessa. We were going to tell you about the temporary loan. Loan? I interrupted. Was there paperwork for this loan? Terms? Interest? A repayment schedule? Or was it just going to be another investment in Noah's future that would never be mentioned again? The spreadsheet on the table seemed to grow larger. Between us, the disparity in numbers impossible to ignore. Noah stared at it, then looked up at our parents with new understanding in his eyes. You told me you were helping Vanessa equally, he said quietly. You always said you were supporting both of us the same. My mother reached for his hand. We have supported you both in the ways you needed, sweetheart. Vanessa's very practical. She's always been independent. Independent by necessity, I corrected. Independent because it was made clear from early on that my achievements didn't warrant the same celebration or support. I thought about my high school graduation, where my valedictorian speech received a dutiful dinner at Olive Garden, while Noah's B-average commencement 3 years later merited a weekend trip to New York. Or my nursing school pinning ceremony, which my parents had arrived late to because Noah had called with a crisis about his course registration for the following semester. Mr. Harrington cleared his throat again. Mrs. Reynolds, Mr. Reynolds, there are several options for how to proceed. Ms. Reynolds has indicated she would prefer to resolve this without involving the authorities, provided the funds are returned immediately and all joint access to her accounts is permanently removed. My mother's eyes widened. Authorities? Surely that's not... Bank fraud over $10,000 is a federal offense, Mr. Harrington stated flatly, as is identity theft and forgery of signature on financial documents. The color drained from my father's face. His entire career was built on trust. Trust that would evaporate instantly if clients learned he had committed financial fraud against his own daughter. Noah pushed his chair back slightly. I don't want stolen money, he said, sliding the check across the table toward our father. Especially not from my sister. It was perhaps the first time in our adult lives that Noah had taken my side against our parents. The shock of it momentarily distracted me from the larger confrontation. Noah, this is your opportunity, my mother insisted, pushing the check back toward him. We can sort out the details with Vanessa later. Your business needs this capital now. My business, Noah said slowly, has failed twice already. Maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe I've been getting help I didn't earn and don't deserve. I hadn't expected this twist, Noah's sudden self-awareness throwing yet another complication into the carefully orchestrated confrontation I'd planned. For years, I'd cast him as the willing beneficiary of our parents' favoritism, never considering he might be as much a puppet in their narrative as I was. My father finally seemed to grasp the severity of the situation. His eyes moved from the bank manager to the documentation on the table, then to me. Vanessa, he said, his voice softer now. We were only trying to help the family. Noah's business could support all of us if it succeeds. We were going to repay your account. When? I asked simply. After his business succeeded? And if it failed again, like the previous 2 attempts? Would you have told me at all if I hadn't discovered the transfer myself? The silence that followed was answer enough. That's what I thought, I said quietly. Before we continue this story, I want to thank you for watching this far. If you're dealing with family financial abuse or know someone who is, you're not alone. The dynamics I'm about to describe are more common than many realize. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and if this story resonates with your experiences. And if you want to see how this confrontation ends and what happened 5 years later, make sure you've subscribed to our channel and hit the notification bell. Now, let's get back to the restaurant scene where my family's financial betrayal was being exposed. I have a proposal, I said, pulling out another document from my folder, this one prepared with the help of a lawyer friend. Full restoration of my funds by tomorrow morning, removal of your access to all my accounts, and a signed acknowledgement that any future financial interactions between us will be formally documented. My mother looked as if I'd slapped her. You can't possibly be serious. We're your parents, not business associates. Parents don't steal from their children, I replied evenly. And this isn't the first time, is it? I placed another statement on the table. This one from my college savings account established when I was a child. The account that had mysteriously underperformed right around the time Noah needed extra funds for his semester abroad in London. You said the market had downturned, I continued, watching comprehension dawn in my father's eyes. You told me my college fund had lost value due to economic factors beyond your control. That's why I had to rely on scholarships and work through school while Noah got to spend 6 months in Europe finding himself. My father's financial expertise had always been his source of authority in our family. He managed the money, made the investments, and explained away any questions with jargon and condescension. For the first time, that expertise was being turned against him as evidence. That was different, he protested weakly. We reallocated some funds temporarily. You stole from my college account when I was 17, I interrupted. And you stole from my home savings at 30. How many times in between did you reallocate my money without my knowledge? Noah looked stunned. Dad, is this true? You took from Vanessa's college fund for my study abroad program? My mother jumped in. It was an investment in your education. International experience is crucial in today's global economy. An investment using Vanessa's money, Noah clarified, his voice hardening, without telling either of us. I hadn't anticipated Noah becoming an ally in this confrontation. For years, he'd been the golden child, the focus of our parents' dreams and resources, while I was the practical backup plan. Now, seeing the documentation laid out so clearly, even he couldn't justify their actions. Mr. Harrington checked his watch. I need a decision on how we're proceeding. Ms. Reynolds has been quite reasonable in her proposed resolution, but if we can't reach an agreement, I'll need to escalate this matter to our fraud department. My father reached for the agreement. I'd prepared. This is extortion. This is accountability, I corrected. Something this family has never applied equally. I thought of all the times I'd covered for Noah over the years. The calls from bars when he was too drunk to drive. The loans he'd never repaid. The family events where I'd taken on all the work while he received all the praise. The pattern had been established so early that I'd accepted it as normal until I began working at the hospital and saw how functional families operated. You paid for Noah's therapy when he was struggling with academic pressure, I said, making air quotes, around the euphemism our family had used for his partying-induced academic probation. But when I asked for help with counseling after losing 3 patients in one devastating shift, you told me to toughen up because that's what I signed up for as a nurse. My mother's expression flickered with what might have been guilt, quickly masked by indignation. We've always supported you, Vanessa. We co-signed your car loan, which I paid every penny of myself, plus the insurance you insisted was too expensive for you to help with, I finished. Meanwhile, Noah totaled 2 vehicles that you replaced, without question. This isn't a competition between siblings, my father insisted. I laughed. That's rich coming from you, Dad. Everything has always been a competition that Noah was predetermined to win. My straight A's were expected while his B- was celebrated. My 16-hour shift saving lives are my job, while Noah's PowerPoint presentations are groundbreaking contributions to the business world. The restaurant had grown quieter, or perhaps my focus had narrowed to our table, to this moment, of truth years in the making. My hands remained steady as I pushed the agreement closer to my father. Sign it, I said. Return my money, remove your access to my accounts, and acknowledge in writing what you've done. Or Mr. Harrington files a formal fraud report, triggering an investigation that will require financial disclosure of all your accounts and transactions. My father's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his Mont Blanc pen, the one he used for signing important documents with clients. Always concerned with appearances, even now. You don't need to do this, Vanessa. My mother tried one last time. We're family. Families help each other. Yes, they do, I agreed. But in functional families, that help doesn't flow exclusively in one direction. It doesn't come with hidden costs or secret reallocations or constant reminders of supposed inadequacy. As my father hesitated with pen hovering over paper, I pulled out one last document from my folder, another bank statement. This one, showing a second account I'd established at a different bank 6 months ago, when I'd first noticed inconsistencies in my savings balance. I've been preparing for this moment longer than you realize, I explained. This is my new account where I've been directing half my savings for the past 6 months, an account you have no access to and never will. Currently, it contains $12,358, 47, Not enough for my down payment yet, but it will be, and every penny will remain mine. The revelation that I'd been planning this, that I'd anticipated their betrayal months before it happened, seemed to finally break through my father's denial. His shoulders sagged as he began to sign the agreement. "This will destroy your brothers." "Chances," my mother said, making one last attempt at manipulation. "After all we've done for you, you'd sabotage Noah's future out of pettiness?" Noah surprised us all by standing up. "Stop it, Mom. Just stop. I don't want Vanessa's money. I never would have accepted it if I'd known where it came from." He turned to me, really looking at me perhaps for the first time in years. "I'm sorry, Ness. I had no idea it was this unbalanced. I swear." The childhood nickname, Ness, momentarily threw me. He hadn't called me that since we were kids, before our parents' differential treatment had erected a wall between us. "I believe you," I said, and was surprised to find I meant it. Noah had been handed everything, taught to expect everything, raised to believe he deserved everything. The fault lay primarily with our parents, who had shaped both our roles in this dysfunctional family drama. My father finished signing and slid the document back to me, avoiding my eyes. "There, are you satisfied now?" I took the agreement and handed it to Mr. Harrington, who reviewed the signatures. "I'll need the wire transfer confirmation for the funds by 9 a.m. tomorrow," he said. "I'll personally oversee the removal of their access to your accounts immediately following." "Vanessa," my mother tried again, her voice softening to the cajoling tone she used when trying to get her way with hospital board members. "Think about what you're doing to this family. Your brother needs this opportunity." "My brother," I said, looking at Noah, "needs to stand on his own 2 feet, and so do I." I gathered my documents, placing them methodically back into my folder. The confrontation I'd been planning for days was winding down, but the magnitude of what had just happened, the permanent shift in our family dynamic, was only beginning to register. Noah reached for the check with my money, tore it in half, and placed the pieces on the table. "I'll find my own startup capital," he said. "Or maybe I won't. Maybe I need to figure out what I actually want instead of what you've always told me I should want." It was the first time I could remember him overtly defying our parents, and the shock on their faces mirrored my own surprise. My father's phone chimed with a notification. He checked it, his expression darkening further. "Your mother's sister just posted on Facebook about being at Bellini's tonight. She's witnessed this entire scene." My mother's hand flew to her throat. "Lisa is here? Where?" She looked around frantically, suddenly concerned with appearances now that a family member might report back to their social circle. I hadn't planned this additional complication, but I welcomed it. For too long, my parents had maintained a perfect facade to the outside world, while treating me like a second-class family member in private. "Let Aunt Lisa see. Let her tell everyone at the country club. Let the truth be known." "I think we're done here," I said, standing up and extending my hand to Mr. Harrington. "Thank you for your assistance." The bank manager nodded, tucking the signed agreement into his own briefcase. "I'll see you tomorrow to finalize everything, Ms. Reynolds." As I gathered my purse and jacket, Noah stood as well. "I'll walk out with you." Our parents remained seated, my mother frantically texting someone, probably damage control with Aunt Lisa, while my father stared blankly at the torn check on the table, the physical evidence of his failed manipulation. Walking toward the restaurant exit, I felt lighter than I had in years. The confrontation had gone largely as planned, with the unexpected bonus of Noah's awakening to our parents' manipulations. Whether that awareness would last remained to be seen, but for now, I'd reclaimed more than just my stolen money. I'd reclaimed my power. Outside Bellini's, the evening air was cool against my flushed skin. The restaurant's warm golden light spilled onto the sidewalk, creating pools of illumination in the gathering dusk. I took a deep breath, letting the tension of the confrontation begin to dissipate. Noah stood beside me, hands shoved in his pockets, looking uncertain, an expression I rarely associated with my perpetually confident brother. "I really didn't know, Ness," he said again, his voice quieter now that we were away from our parents. "About the college fund, about this money, any of it." I studied his face, searching for the tells I'd learned to recognize over the years. The slight eye shift when he was lying, the way he touched his ear when concealing something. I found none of them. "I believe you," I repeated, surprising myself again with the realization that I did. They've been manipulating both of us in different ways. A black Mercedes pulled up to the curb, the car service I'd arranged earlier. Another careful detail in my planned exit strategy, ensuring I wouldn't be trapped in a car with my parents afterward. "Need a ride?" I offered, gesturing to the waiting vehicle. Noah hesitated, glancing back toward the restaurant entrance. "I should probably deal with Mom and Dad. They're going to be furious, manipulative, ready to paint me as the ungrateful villain who destroyed the family." I finished for him. "Yeah, I know the playbook." He winced. "Has it always been this obvious?" "To everyone except us, apparently." Inside Bellini's, visible through the large front windows, our parents were gathering their things, my mother's movements sharp with anger, my father's posture defeated. They had perhaps 10 minutes before they'd emerge, and I had no intention of being present when they did. "I meant what I said in there," Noah continued, "about finding my own way. Maybe this is a wake-up call I needed." For the first time in years, I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and saw not the golden child who had taken everything that should have been shared, but another victim of our parents' dysfunctional dynamics. They had raised him to expect preferential treatment, to believe his ideas were automatically brilliant, to assume support would always be available regardless of merit. In their own way, they had sabotaged his development as much as they had undermined mine. "Do you even want to start another business?" I asked, the question emerging from a genuine place of curiosity rather than resentment. Noah's eyes widened slightly, as if the question had never occurred to him. I don't know. It's what Dad always assumed I'd do. Follow in his footsteps, but bigger and better, he always said." The car service driver opened the rear door, waiting patiently. "I have to go," I said, gesturing toward the waiting car. "But, Noah, maybe think about what you actually want, not what they've programmed you to want." He nodded slowly. "What about you? Will you still get your condo?" "Eventually. Once my funds are restored and I save the rest. It'll take a few more months of double shifts, but I'll get there." "I could help," he offered, then quickly raised his hands when he saw my expression. "Not with their money, with my own. I have some savings. Not much, but—" "No," I interrupted firmly. "That's exactly what they would want. For you, to rescue me, for us to reenact their dynamic even without them present. I need to do this myself." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Right. Sorry. Force of habit, I guess." From inside the restaurant, I could see our father signing the credit card receipt, our mother gathering her designer purse. Time was running short. "I should go," I said, moving toward the waiting car. "Vanessa," Noah called as I was about to step inside. "What happens now? With us, I mean." It was a more complicated question than he probably realized. The siblings we might have been to each other, close, supportive, equal, had been sacrificed years ago on the altar of our parents' favoritism. Could we build something new from the ashes of that loss? "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But I'm willing to find out, as long as it's just us. No parental interference, no financial games, no old dynamics." He nodded, a cautious smile forming. "I'd like that." I returned the smile briefly before sliding into the car's leather interior. As the driver pulled away from the curb, I caught a glimpse of my parents emerging from Bellini's, my mother's gaze finding me through the car window, her expression a complex mixture of anger and disbelief. I didn't look back. The car turned at the corner, and Bellini's disappeared from view. I leaned back against the seat, exhaling slowly, feeling the adrenaline of the confrontation begin to ebb, leaving in its wake a curious blend of exhaustion and exhilaration. My phone buzzed with incoming texts, likely my mother launching into damage control mode or my father attempting to reassert authority. I silenced it without looking. Whatever they had to say could wait until tomorrow, after my money was safely returned and their access to my accounts permanently severed. "Where to, ma'am?" the driver asked, meeting my eyes in the rearview mirror. I gave him the address of my small apartment, then reconsidered. "Actually, could you drive by Lakeside Towers first, on Windsor Avenue?" "Of course." 15 minutes later, the car pulled up across from Lakeside Towers, the upscale condominium building where I'd found my dream unit. Unit 814, a corner. One bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows and a small balcony overlooking the lake. The one I'd shown my mother pictures of, only to receive dismissive responses. I gazed up at the 8th floor, where warm lights glowed in some windows. Soon, I promised myself, once my money was returned, once I saved the remaining amount needed, one of those windows would be mine. "Take me home now, please," I instructed the driver, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. This evening hadn't gone exactly as I'd planned. Noah's support had been an unexpected variable, but the outcome was what mattered. I had stood up to my parents, exposed their theft, and set boundaries that could never be uncrossed. Whether they would respect those boundaries remained to be seen, but for the first time in my adult life, I felt truly in control of my own future. My phone continued to buzz in my purse. I finally pulled it out, expecting to see my parents' names on the screen. Instead, a text from Mr. Harrington appeared. "Transfer initiated for full amount. Will complete by 9 a.m. tomorrow. All paperwork for removing joint access prepared for your signature. Well done, Ms. Reynolds." I smiled, putting the phone away. Phase 1 complete. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter, one written entirely on my own terms. The next morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through my apartment's single window as I prepared for my 7 a.m. meeting with Mr. Harrington. I had deliberately scheduled it early, before my parents could attempt to intercept or interfere. My phone showed 27 missed calls and 43 text messages, most from my mother, several from my father, and surprisingly, none from Noah. I scrolled through a few of the texts, noting the predictable progression from anger. "How dare you embarrass us like this?" To manipulation, "After everything we've done for you," to false concern, "We're worried about your mental state," to outright threats, "Your father's reputation in this community could be ruined." The last message, sent at 3:17 a.m., gave me pause. "We're coming to your apartment at 8. This needs to be discussed as a family." I checked the time, 6:22 a.m. Plenty of time to meet with Mr. Harrington and be gone before they arrived. My parents still had a key to my apartment, another boundary violation I'd tolerated for too long. But today, that would change too. The First National Bank building was quiet when I arrived at 6:55, most of the staff not yet in for the day. Mr. Harrington was waiting in the lobby as promised, briefcase in hand. "Good morning, Ms. Reynolds," he greeted me, professional as always. "Everything is prepared, as discussed." I followed him to his office, where documents were already laid out on his polished desk. The computer screen showed my account, now reflecting the returned $35,000, plus the $427.86 that had been in the account originally. "The transfer completed overnight," he confirmed. "Here are the forms to remove your parents as joint account holders and change your account to sole ownership." I signed where indicated, each signature feeling like another brick in the wall I was building between my past and my future. "And here is the signed acknowledgement from your father," Mr. Harrington continued, sliding across the document from last night. "I've made copies for your records." I took the document, noting my father's signature at the bottom, slightly shakier than his usual confident scrawl, but legally binding nonetheless. "Is there anything else you require?" Mr. Harrington asked. "Yes," I said, pulling out a business card from my purse. "This is the locksmith I've scheduled to meet me at my apartment at 9 a.m. Could you confirm with him that I'll be there? I want to make sure we don't miss connections." If Mr. Harrington thought it odd that I was asking him to contact my locksmith, he didn't show it. After the events of last night, he seemed prepared to extend professional courtesies beyond his usual role. "Of course," he said, taking the card. "And Ms. Reynolds, if I may speak personally for a moment?" I nodded, curious about what this formal, buttoned-up man might say. In my 30 years of banking, I've seen many family financial situations go awry. What your parents did was not just ethically wrong, but potentially criminal. You handled it with remarkable composure. "Thank you," I replied, somewhat taken aback by the unexpected praise. "If you ever need banking references for your future home purchase or other financial matters, please don't hesitate to ask." We shook hands, and I left the bank with my financial autonomy restored and reinforced. Outside, I checked my watch, 7:38 a.m. My parents would be arriving at my apartment in approximately 20 minutes, expecting to find me there, expecting to continue their pattern of manipulation and control. Instead, they would find an empty apartment and, shortly thereafter, a locksmith changing the locks. I hailed a taxi and directed the driver not to my apartment but to Lakeside Towers. I had a meeting scheduled with the sales office at 8:30, another detail in my carefully orchestrated plan. With my funds restored and the documentation of stable income I'd prepared, I was ready to make an offer on Unit 814. My phone rang again. My mother. I silenced it without answering, then turned it off completely. Whatever crisis they manufactured today, I wouldn't be available to manage it. The taxi pulled up to Lakeside Towers just as my watch showed 8:15. Perfect timing. I paid the driver and stepped out, gazing up at the gleaming building that represented not just a home, but a declaration of independence. Inside the elegant lobby, the sales associate, Melanie, was already waiting with a portfolio of information about Unit 814. "Ms. Reynolds," she greeted me warmly. "You're right on time. Are you ready to see the unit again before making your decision?" "Actually," I said, feeling a surge of confidence, "I'm ready to make an offer today. I have my pre-approval and down payment ready." Her eyes widened slightly in pleased surprise. "Wonderful. Let's go up to the office and get started on the paperwork." As we rode the elevator to the sales office on the 3rd floor, my phone would have been buzzing continuously in my purse had it been turned on. My parents would be arriving at my empty apartment now, their expectation of finding me waiting to be lectured completely thwarted. For a moment, I allowed myself to outside Bellini's. The evening air was cool against my flushed skin. The restaurant's warm golden light spilled onto the sidewalk, creating pools of illumination in the gathering dusk. I took a deep breath, letting the tension of the confrontation begin to dissipate. Noah stood beside me, hands shoved in his pockets, looking uncertain, an expression I rarely associated with my perpetually confident brother. "I really didn't know, Ness," he said again, his voice quieter now that we were away from our parents. "About the college fund, about this money. Any of it." I studied his face, searching for the tells I'd learned to recognize over the years. The slight eye shift when he was lying, the way he touched his ear when concealing something. I found none of them. "I believe you," I repeated, surprising myself again with the realization that I did. "They've been manipulating both of us in different ways." A black Mercedes pulled up to the curb, the car service I'd arranged earlier. Another careful detail in my planned exit strategy, ensuring I wouldn't be trapped in a car with my parents afterward. "Need a ride?" I offered, gesturing to the waiting vehicle. Noah hesitated, glancing back toward the restaurant entrance. I should probably deal with Mom and Dad. They're going to be furious, manipulative, ready to paint me as the ungrateful villain who destroyed the family. I finished for him. Yeah, I know the playbook. He winced. Has it always been this obvious? To everyone except us, apparently. Inside Bellini's, visible through the large front windows, our parents were gathering their things. My mother's movements sharp with anger. My father's posture defeated. They had perhaps 10 minutes before they'd emerge, and I had no intention of being present when they did. I meant what I said in there, Noah continued, about finding my own way. Maybe this is a wake-up call I needed. For the first time in years, I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and saw not the golden child who had taken everything that should have been shared, but another victim of our parents' dysfunctional dynamics. They had raised him to expect preferential treatment, to believe his ideas were automatically brilliant, to assume support would always be available regardless of merit. In their own way, they had sabotaged his development as much as they had undermined mine. Do you even want to start another business? I asked, the question emerging from a genuine place of curiosity rather than resentment. Noah's eyes widened slightly, as if the question had never occurred to him. I don't know. It's what Dad always assumed I'd do. Follow in his footsteps. But bigger and better, he always said. The car service driver opened the rear door, waiting patiently. I have to go, I said, gesturing toward the waiting car. But Noah, maybe think about what you actually want, not what they've programmed. You to want. He nodded slowly. What about you? Will you still get your condo? Eventually. Once my funds are restored and I save the rest. It'll take a few more months of double shifts, but I'll get there. I could help, he offered, then quickly raised his hands when he saw my expression. Not with their money, with my own. I have some savings, not much, but… No, I interrupted firmly. That's exactly what they would want, for you to rescue me, for us to reenact their dynamic even without them present. I need to do this myself. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Right. Sorry. Force of habit, I guess. From inside the restaurant, I could see our father signing the credit card receipt, our mother gathering her designer purse. Time was running short. I should go, I said, moving toward the waiting car. Vanessa, Noah called as I was about to step inside. What happens now? With us, I mean. It was a more complicated question than he probably realized. The siblings we might have been to each other, close, supportive, equal, had been sacrificed years ago on the altar of our parents' favoritism. Could we build something new from the ashes of that loss? I don't know, I answered honestly. But I'm willing to find out, as long as it's just us. No parental interference, no financial games, no old dynamics. He nodded, a cautious smile forming. I'd like that. I returned the smile briefly before sliding into the car's leather interior. As the driver pulled away from the curb, I caught a glimpse of my parents emerging from Bellini's, my mother's, gaze finding me through the car window, her expression a complex mixture of anger and disbelief. I didn't look back. The car turned at the corner, and Bellini's disappeared from view. I leaned back against the seat, exhaling slowly, feeling the adrenaline of the confrontation begin to ebb, leaving in its wake a curious blend of exhaustion and exhilaration. My phone buzzed with incoming texts, likely my mother launching into damage control mode or my father attempting to reassert authority. I silenced it without looking. Whatever they had to say could wait until tomorrow, after my money was safely returned and their access to my accounts permanently severed. Where to, ma'am? The driver asked, meeting my eyes in the rearview mirror. I gave him the address of my small apartment, then reconsidered. Actually, could you drive by Lakeside Towers first, on Windsor Avenue? Of course. 15 minutes later, the car pulled up across from Lakeside Towers, the upscale condominium building where I'd found my dream unit. Unit 814, a corner one-bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows and a small balcony overlooking the lake. The one I'd shown my mother pictures of, only to receive dismissive responses. I gazed up at the 8th floor, where warm lights glowed in some windows. Soon, I promised myself. Once my money was returned, once I saved the remaining amount needed, one of those windows would be mine. Take me home now, please, I instructed the driver, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. This evening hadn't gone exactly as I'd planned. Noah's support had been an unexpected variable, but the outcome was what mattered. I had stood up to my parents, exposed their theft, and set boundaries that could never be uncrossed. Whether they would respect those boundaries remained to be seen, but for the first time in my adult life, I felt truly in control of my own future. My phone continued to buzz in my purse. I finally pulled it out, expecting to see my parents' names on the screen. Instead, a text from Mr. Harrington appeared. Transfer initiated for full amount. Will complete by 9 a.m. tomorrow. All paperwork for removing joint access prepared for your signature. Well done, Ms. Reynolds. I smiled, putting the phone away. Phase 1, complete. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter, one written entirely on my own terms. The next morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through my apartment's single window as I prepared for my 7 a.m. meeting with Mr. Harrington. I had deliberately scheduled it early, before my parents could attempt to intercept or interfere. My phone showed 27 missed calls and 43 text messages, most from my mother, several from my father, and surprisingly, none from Noah. I scrolled through a few of the texts, noting the predictable progression from anger. How dare you embarrass us like this? To manipulation. After everything we've done for you. To false concern. We're worried about your mental state. To outright threats. Your father's reputation in this community could be ruined. The last message, sent at 3:17 a.m., gave me pause. We're coming to your apartment at 8. This needs to be discussed as a family. I checked the time, 6:22 a.m. Plenty of time to meet with Mr. Harrington and be gone before they arrived. My parents still had a key to my apartment, another boundary violation I'd tolerated for too long. But today that would change too. The First National Bank building was quiet when I arrived at 6:55, most of the staff not yet in for the day. Mr. Harrington was waiting in the lobby as promised, briefcase in hand. Good morning, Ms. Reynolds, he greeted me, professional as always. Everything is prepared as discussed. I followed him to his office where documents were already laid out on his polished desk. The computer screen showed my account, now reflecting the returned $35,000, plus the $427.86 that had been in the account originally. The transfer completed? Overnight, he confirmed. Here are the forms to remove your parents as joint account holders and change your account to sole ownership. I signed where indicated, each signature feeling like another brick in the wall I was building between my past and my future. And here is the signed acknowledgement from your father, Mr. Harrington continued, sliding across the document from last night. I've made copies for your records. I took the document, noting my father's signature at the bottom, slightly, shakier than his usual confident scrawl, but legally binding nonetheless. Is there anything else you require? Mr. Harrington asked. Yes, I said, pulling out a business card from my purse. This is the locksmith I've scheduled to meet me, at my apartment at 9 a.m. Could you confirm with him that I'll be there? I want to make sure we don't miss connections. If Mr. Harrington thought it odd that I was asking him to contact my locksmith, he didn't show it. After the events of last night, he seemed prepared to extend professional courtesies beyond his usual role. Of course, he said, taking the card. And Ms. Reynolds, if I may speak personally for a moment? I nodded, curious about what this formal, buttoned-up man might say. In my 30 years of banking, I've seen many family financial situations go awry. What your parents did was not just ethically wrong, but potentially criminal. You handled it with remarkable composure. Thank you, I replied, somewhat taken aback by the unexpected praise. If you ever need banking references for your future home purchase or other financial matters, please don't hesitate to ask. We shook hands, and I left the bank with my financial autonomy restored and reinforced. Outside, I checked my watch, 7:38 a.m. My parents would be arriving at my apartment in approximately 20 minutes, expecting to find me there, expecting to continue their pattern of manipulation and control. Instead, they would find an empty apartment and, shortly thereafter, a locksmith changing the locks. I hailed a taxi and directed the driver not to my apartment but to Lakeside Towers. I had a meeting scheduled with the sales office at 8:30, another detail in my carefully orchestrated plan. With my funds restored and the documentation of stable income I'd prepared, I was ready to make an offer on Unit 814. My phone rang again. My mother. I silenced it without answering, then turned it off completely. Whatever crisis they manufactured today, I wouldn't be available to manage it. The taxi pulled up to Lakeside Towers just as my watch showed 8:15. Perfect timing. I paid the driver and stepped out, gazing up at the gleaming building that represented not just a home, but a declaration of independence. Inside the elegant lobby, the sales associate, Melanie, was already waiting with a portfolio of information about Unit 814. Ms. Reynolds, she greeted me warmly. You're right on time. Are you ready to see the unit again before making your decision? Actually, I said, feeling a surge of confidence, I'm ready to make an offer today. I have my pre-approval and down payment ready. Her eyes widened, slightly in pleased surprise. Wonderful. Let's go up to the office and get started on the paperwork. As we rode the elevator to the sales office on the 3rd floor, my phone would have been buzzing continuously in my purse had it been turned on. My parents would be arriving at my empty apartment now, their expectation of finding me waiting to be lectured completely thwarted. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine their reactions. The repeated knocking, the increasingly angry calls, the eventual realization that their carefully planned ambush had failed. No doubt they would frame it as further evidence of my irresponsible behavior, rather than recognizing it as a deliberate evasion of their manipulation tactics. The sales office was bright and airy, with floor plans of available units displayed on the walls and a large conference table in the center. Melanie gestured for me to take a seat while she prepared the offer paperwork. The unit is listed at $285,000, she reminded me. How much are you prepared to offer? $275,000 with a 15% down payment, I replied confidently, having researched comparable sales in the building. I'm pre-approved for the mortgage and can close within 45 days. Melanie nodded approvingly. That's a strong offer. Let me draft this up for you. As she typed at her computer, I gazed out the window at the lakefront view. This building represented everything I'd worked for: independence, security, a space that was truly mine. No parental judgments about decor choices, no surprise visits, no subtle reminders that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of autonomy they deigned to grant me. My thoughts turned to Noah and his unexpected alliance last night. Had it been genuine? Would it last beyond the shock of the moment? Or would he revert to his role as the favored child once our parents worked their manipulative magic on him? Here we are, Melanie said, printing out the offer documents. If you'll just review and sign these, I can submit them to the seller today. I read through the paperwork carefully, a habit ingrained from years of double-checking medication, orders, and patient charts. Everything appeared in order. With a steady hand, I signed my name to each document, each signature another step toward the future I'd envisioned. Perfect, Melanie said, gathering the signed papers. I'll call you as soon as I hear back from the seller. Given the current market and the strength of your offer, I'm optimistic. We shook hands, and I left the sales office feeling lighter than I had in months. Outside Lakeside Towers, I turned my phone back on, bracing myself for the barrage of notifications. They came immediately: 12 missed calls, 28 text messages, and 3 voicemails, all from my parents. I deleted the voicemails without listening to them and skimmed the texts, noting the escalating urgency and anger. The most recent, sent just 5 minutes ago, from my mother. "The locksmith says he has orders from you. What do you think you're doing?" I smiled, picturing the scene at my apartment. The locksmith had arrived as scheduled, no doubt explaining to my bewildered parents that he had instructions to change the locks at the tenant's request. Another carefully orchestrated element in my plan to establish firm, unbreachable boundaries. My phone rang in my hand. Noah. Unlike my parents' calls, I decided to answer this one. "Hey," I said cautiously. "Ness?" he replied, his voice low as if he didn't want to be overheard. "Mom and Dad are losing it. They went to your apartment this morning and found a locksmith changing your locks." "I know," I replied calmly. "I scheduled him." A pause, then what sounded like a reluctant chuckle. "That's actually pretty brilliant. They're completely thrown off their game. Dad keeps saying something about reasonable discussion, while Mom is threatening to call the police, though I'm not sure what crime she thinks you've committed. Asserting independence, probably. In their world, that's the ultimate transgression. They're saying you've had some kind of breakdown, that the stress of your job has made you paranoid and irrational." I sighed, unsurprised by their attempt to pathologize my perfectly reasonable response to their theft. "And what do you think, Noah?" Another pause. "I think you're the sanest person in our family. I think you've finally stopped playing by their rules, and they don't know how to handle it." His response surprised me, not just the words themselves, but the clear-eyed assessment behind them. Perhaps the golden child was finally seeing through the family mythology. "Where are you now?" he asked. I hesitated, not quite ready to share all my plans, even with this newly enlightened version of my brother. "Taking care of some business. I'll tell you about it later. Are you still at my apartment?" "Yeah. Mom's on the phone with her lawyer friend now, trying to find out if they have any legal recourse for you changing your own locks." The eye roll was audible in his voice. "Tell them they're welcome to explore all legal options. Meanwhile, I'll be exploring restraining orders if they attempt to enter my apartment without permission again." Noah whistled low. "You're really done, aren't you? Like, completely done with their games." "Completely," I confirmed. 30 years is enough. I'm writing my own script from now on." "Good for you," he said, and I was surprised by the genuine admiration in his voice. "Listen, they're coming back. I should go. But Ness, I meant what I said last night. About figuring out what I actually want, not what they've programmed me to want. About us trying to have a real relationship without their interference." "I'd like that," I said softly, allowing myself to feel a cautious hope about reconnecting with the brother I'd lost to our parents' toxic dynamics. "I'll call you later," he promised before hanging up. I put my phone away and started walking toward the lakefront path. The morning was beautiful, the water reflecting the clear blue sky, sailboats dotting the horizon. A perfect day for new beginnings. My pager buzzed. The hospital. I checked the message. "Multiple vehicle accident. All available staff report. To ER." Duty called. I hailed another taxi, directing the driver to Memorial Hospital. As we pulled away from Lakeside Towers, I took one last look at the building that would soon be my home. The confrontation with my parents wasn't over. In fact, it was likely just beginning. But the dynamics had shifted irrevocably. I had reclaimed my money, secured my accounts, changed my locks, and put in an offer on my dream home. Most importantly, I had shattered the patterns of control and favoritism that had defined our family for decades. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms, from a position of strength rather than subjugation. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly free to write my own story, one where I wasn't the supporting character in someone else's narrative, but the protagonist in my own. The emergency room at Memorial Hospital was organized chaos when I arrived. Trauma bays filled with victims from the multi-vehicle accident, medical staff moving with practiced efficiency, the air thick with urgent commands and the beeping of monitoring equipment. I changed into scrubs quickly, pulling my hair back and stepping into the familiar role of charge nurse. "Reynolds, Bay 3, Dr. Patel directed as I emerged from the locker room. 27-year-old male, chest trauma, possible pneumothorax. For the next 6 hours, personal concerns disappeared as I immersed myself in the work I loved, monitoring vital signs, administering medications, coordinating with doctors and specialists, comforting frightened patients. Here, in this space, my competence was never questioned. My judgment was respected. My contributions were valued. By mid-afternoon, the crisis had stabilized. Most patients had been treated and either admitted or discharged, the remaining few with non-critical injuries waiting for final clearance. I took my first real break, retreating to the staff lounge with a cup of lukewarm coffee. "You saved that kid in Bay 5, Dr. Patel commented, dropping into the chair across from me. "That catch on the medication interaction was brilliant." I acknowledged the compliment with a tired smile. "Just doing my job." "Well, your just doing your job probably prevented a major adverse reaction. Good work, Reynolds." As he left, I realized how starkly different this recognition felt from any I'd received from my parents. Dr. Patel's praise was specific, genuine, and based on observable performance. My parents' rare acknowledgments had always been vague, grudging, and immediately undermined by comparison to Noah's supposedly greater achievements. My phone, which had been silent during my shift, buzzed with a text. Melanie from the sales office. "Seller countered at $280,000. Please call when." "You can. $280,000, only $5,000 more than my offer. With my restored savings and the additional amount I'd sequestered in my secondary account, I could manage the down payment. The mortgage payments would be tight but doable, especially with the promotion I was being considered for." I texted back, "I accept the counter. We'll call in 1 hour to discuss details." Another text came through immediately after. "Noah, parents finally left your apartment. Dad's threatening to cut you off completely, as if that's somehow a punishment after what they did. Can we talk when you're free?" I smiled grimly at the irony of my father's threat. Cut me off from what, exactly? The family that stole from me? The support that always came with strings attached? The conditional love that depended on my compliance? I texted back, "Working until 8, free after that." Setting my phone down, I gazed out the small lounge window at the hospital courtyard below. Staff members on break sat on benches in the late afternoon sun, a brief respite from the intensity of medical work. A family huddled together near the central fountain, parents comforting a child, their body language conveying protection and support. That image, of parents as protectors rather than predators, stirred something painful within me. I had spent so many years making excuses for my family's dynamics, normalizing what I now recognized as emotional and financial abuse. How many times had I convinced myself that their treatment was justified, that I somehow deserved less than Noah? That their conditional love was the only kind I could expect? Lisa, one of the ER nurses, entered the lounge and headed for the coffee machine. "Rough day," she commented, pouring a cup of the dark overbrewed liquid. "That family in the waiting room is still asking for you. Said they need to speak with you urgently." I straightened. "What family?" "Older couple, maybe 60s? Well-dressed man and woman. Said they're your parents?" "I told them you were with patients and couldn't be disturbed." My stomach tightened. Of course they had tracked me here. My work schedule was no secret, and they knew I'd been called in for the emergency. If they ask again, I said evenly, please inform them that I'm unavailable and will remain unavailable. If they persist, security should be called. Lisa's eyebrows rose in surprise. That's serious, huh? That's serious, I confirmed. They're not here for any medical reason, just trying to ambush me after I've established clear boundaries. She nodded, her expression shifting to understanding. Got it. I'll spread the word at the nurses' station. No access. Security if needed. The solidarity warmed me. Another reminder of how functional professional relationships differed from my family's toxic dynamic. Thank you. After Lisa left, I remained in the lounge, mentally preparing for the inevitable confrontation. My parents wouldn't leave without seeing me, without attempting to reassert control. They would try to leverage my workplace against me, counting on my professional commitment to avoid a scene. But that calculation, like so many they'd made recently, would prove inaccurate. I had no intention of engaging with them here, no matter how they framed their urgent need to speak with me. I used the remaining minutes of my break to call Melanie and formally accept the counteroffer on the condo. We can schedule the inspection for next week, she suggested, and aim for closing in 40 days if all goes well. Perfect, I agreed. Email me the paperwork and I'll sign everything tonight. One more piece falling into place, one more step toward independence. When my break ended, I returned to the ER floor, purposely using the staff corridors to avoid the waiting area where my parents likely remained. At the nurses' station, several colleagues gave me knowing looks. Security's been notified, the charge nurse for the incoming shift informed me quietly. Just as a precaution, those people have been here for over an hour, getting increasingly insistent. I nodded gratefully. I appreciate the support. Family stuff? She asked. Something like that, I replied. Very one-sided family stuff. For the remainder of my shift, I focused on my patients, on the detailed handoffs to incoming staff, on the meticulous documentation that ensured continuity of care. Each task grounded me in my professional identity, the competent, responsible nurse who saved lives and made difficult decisions daily. This version of myself stood in stark contrast to the role my parents had assigned me in our family drama. The dependable disappointment, useful when needed, but never quite measuring up. At 7:45, 15 minutes before my shift officially ended, I received a message from security. My parents had finally left the hospital after being informed that continued demands to see me could result in their removal from the premises. Relief washed over me, followed immediately by a renewed wave of determination. They had attempted to invade my workplace, to use my professional setting as leverage for their personal agenda. Another boundary crossed, another manipulation tactic deployed. In the locker room, I changed out of my scrubs and into my street clothes, checking my phone to find 3 missed calls from my father and a text message that perfectly encapsulated our dysfunctional family dynamic. Your behavior is breaking your mother's heart. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? Noah never would have treated us this way. Noah. Always the comparison, always the standard I could never reach. Except now Noah himself had begun to question the family narrative, to recognize the manipulation that had shaped us both. Outside the hospital, the early evening air carried the first hints of autumn coolness. I zipped up my jacket and headed for the staff parking lot, watching carefully for any sign of my parents. Mercedes. They might have left the building, but I wouldn't put it past them to wait in the parking lot for another ambush attempt. The lot appeared clear, but I remained vigilant as I approached my modest Toyota, the car I'd paid for largely myself, with the loan from my parents repaid in full with interest. Unlike Noah's series of luxury vehicles, each replaced whenever he tired of the current model. As I unlocked my car, my phone rang. Noah again. Hey, I answered, sliding into the driver's seat and locking the doors immediately. They went. To your hospital, he said without preamble, his voice tight with what sounded like anger. They actually went to your workplace to confront you. I know. Security eventually convinced them to leave. A sharp exhale from his end. I don't even have words for what this is. They're completely out of control. This is who they've always been, Noah, I replied wearily. The only difference is now I'm not playing along, so their tactics are escalating. They came back to my place afterward, he continued. Dad's talking about consulting his lawyer about possible defamation because you involved the bank manager. Mom's saying, you're having some kind of breakdown and need an intervention. I laughed bitterly. Of course. Because standing up for myself and refusing to be stolen from must indicate mental instability. I told them they were wrong, Noah said, his voice quieter now. I told them what they did was theft, plain and simple, and that they should be grateful you're not pressing charges. The surprising alliance with my brother continued to evolve, shifting the family dynamic in ways I hadn't anticipated. How did they take that? Dad stormed out. Mom cried and said I've always taken Vanessa's side, which is so absurd it would be funny if it weren't so sad. I started my car, the engine's familiar rumble a comforting sound. Noah, I need to ask you something and I want an honest answer. Okay. Did you know before last night how unbalanced their treatment of us was? Did you see it at all? A long pause followed, filled only with the sound of our breathing. Finally, he spoke, his voice heavy with what sounded like shame. I always knew on some level, but it was easier not to see it clearly, you know? Easier to accept their version where I was just fulfilling my potential or whatever bullshit they fed me. Easier to believe I deserved the help, the praise, the money. His honesty surprised me. I had expected defensiveness, perhaps even a retreat to the family narrative that painted him as the deserving golden child and me as perpetually lacking. Last night, he continued, seeing it all laid out like that, the actual numbers, the pattern over years, I couldn't ignore it anymore. And then watching them today, how quickly they turned to threats and manipulation instead of just admitting what they did was wrong. It's like seeing them clearly for the first time. I pulled out of the parking space, heading toward the exit. So what happens now? With you and them? I don't know, he admitted. I'm staying at a hotel tonight. Needed space to think. But I do know I can't go back to pretending their behavior is normal or acceptable. And with us? I asked, the question emerging more vulnerable than I'd intended. What happens with you and me? That's up to you, Ness. I'd like to try being actual siblings, not competitors in their weird game, just family. Real family. But I understand if that's asking too much after everything. I navigated onto the main road, considering his words. The possibility of a genuine relationship with my brother, one based on mutual respect rather than parental manipulation, was both appealing and frightening. Could we truly overcome decades of conditioning? Could he remain allied with me once our parents turned the full force of their manipulation on him? I'd like to try, I said finally, but slowly, with clear boundaries. That's fair, he replied, audible relief in his voice. More than fair, considering. As I drove home, to my soon-to-be former apartment with its newly changed locks, I felt myself at a crossroads. The confrontation with my parents wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. They would escalate further, try new tactics, perhaps even attempt to turn family friends or other relatives against me. But for the first time, I wasn't facing their manipulation alone. I had allies, Noah, surprisingly, Mr. Harrington at the bank, my colleagues at the hospital. Most importantly, I had myself, stronger and clearer than I'd ever been about what I deserved and what I would no longer tolerate. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. My parents would not surrender control easily. But tonight, I had my restored savings, an accepted offer on my dream home, newly secured boundaries, and the beginning of an honest relationship with my brother. Small victories, perhaps, in the larger war for independence, but victories nonetheless. 3 days passed in relative calm, deceptive tranquility before the inevitable storm. My parents made no further attempts to confront me at work or my apartment, though their text messages continued, alternating between guilt trips and veiled threats. I left them unanswered, focusing instead on finalizing the paperwork for my condo purchase and continuing my regular shifts at the hospital. Noah and I met for coffee, tentatively navigating our new dynamic without parental interference. It was awkward at first, decades of conditioned competition not easily overcome, but gradually we found common ground in shared childhood memories and mutual frustration with our parents' manipulation. "They've been calling me constantly," he confided, stirring his latte absently, "trying to get me to talk sense into you. Dad even offered to fund my startup completely if I could get you to drop this nonsense." I raised an eyebrow. And I told him I wasn't interested in being their mediator or taking bribes. He shook his head. "The money they're suddenly willing to give me. It makes me wonder how much they've been hiding all along." The home inspection for my condo was scheduled for Thursday morning, a day I'd specifically requested off from work weeks earlier. As I dressed in jeans and a casual sweater, preparing to meet the inspector at Lakeside Towers, my phone lit up with a text from Aunt Lisa. "Just a heads up. Your parents mentioned to me they have a surprise planned for you today. Something about meeting you at a property. Be careful, honey." My stomach tightened. Of course they would know about the inspection. They had always maintained a network of family friends and acquaintances who unwittingly fed them information. Someone at the bank, perhaps, or even at the real estate office. I called Melanie immediately. "Is there any way we can reschedule the inspector for later today, or even push to tomorrow?" "I'm sorry, Ms. Reynolds, but this inspector is booked solid for weeks. If we cancel now, we might not get another appointment until after our closing deadline." I weighed my options. Postponing wasn't feasible, but I couldn't risk another public confrontation, especially during something as important as the home inspection. The condo represented my future, my independence. I wouldn't let them taint it with their drama. "Is there a back entrance to the building?" I asked. "Or a service elevator I could use?" Melanie paused. "Yes, there's a service entrance on the east side, but..." "Perfect. I'll meet the inspector there. And Melanie, if an older couple arrives asking about the inspection for Unit 814, please don't confirm or deny anything. Direct any questions to me." "Of course," she replied, sounding slightly confused but professional. "Is everything all right?" "Family complications," I offered simply. "Nothing that will affect the purchase, I promise." I texted Noah. "Parents may try to ambush me at condo inspection today. Any insight on what they're planning?" His response came quickly. "They mentioned something about making you see reason at your ridiculous condo viewing. Dad's bringing financial projections to prove you can't afford it. Mom's bringing Dr. Lewis. Dr. Lewis, my mother's longtime friend and our former family physician." The implication was clear. They were escalating to suggestions of mental instability, perhaps even attempting to question my competence to make financial decisions. I arrived at Lakeside Towers 30 minutes early, using the service entrance as arranged with Melanie. The building maintenance supervisor escorted me up the service elevator to the 8th floor, where Melanie waited outside Unit 814. "The inspector called," she said, checking her watch. "He's running about 15 minutes behind schedule." "That's fine," I replied, glancing down the hallway toward the main elevators. "Has anyone else asked about this unit today?" "Not yet," she said, her expression curious but discreet. We waited in the empty condo, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows that had first captured my heart. The view of the lake stretched before us, blue water sparkling under the clear autumn sky. This space represented everything I'd worked for, not just financially, but emotionally. A place where I set the rules, where I answered to no one, where I could finally exhale fully. My phone buzzed with a text from the building's front desk attendant. Another ally Melanie had quietly arranged after sensing my concern. Older couple asking about Unit 8 sign inspection. Claim to be your parents. Instructions? I texted back, please inform them the inspection has been rescheduled for tomorrow. Direct them to call me for details. It was a temporary solution at best. They would eventually realize the deception, but it might buy me the time needed to complete the inspection without interference. 10 minutes later, the inspector arrived, a methodical, detail-oriented man who barely acknowledged our presence as he began examining every inch of the unit, testing appliances, checking electrical outlets, inspecting the plumbing. I followed, at a respectful distance, noting his observations and occasionally asking questions. My phone vibrated again, the front desk. They insisted on coming up, security attempting to stall, but they're quite persistent. So much for buying time. I turned to Melanie. My parents are on their way up. They weren't invited and have no role in this purchase. Could you please meet them at the elevator and explain that this is a private inspection? Understanding dawned in her eyes. The family complications, I presume? Leave it to me. As she stepped into the hallway, I returned my attention to the inspector, who was now examining the HVAC system with impressive thoroughness. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to focus on his explanations about the unit's heating efficiency and air circulation. Raised voices in the hallway signaled my parents' arrival. I steeled myself, determined not to let their presence derail this important step in securing my new home. Ma'am, sir, as I've explained, this is a private inspection. Melanie's professional voice carried clearly. Ms. Reynolds has not authorized additional attendees. This is ridiculous, my father's voice boomed. We are her parents. We have every right to be here. Robert, please, my mother's voice, pitched to carry the perfect note of maternal concern. We're just worried about our daughter making such a large financial commitment without proper guidance. The inspector glanced toward the door, momentarily distracted by the commotion. Family? He asked simply. Not involved in this purchase, I replied firmly. Please continue. He nodded and returned to his examination of the kitchen fixtures, while I moved closer to the door, preparing to intercept my parents if necessary. Ms. Reynolds has specifically requested privacy for this inspection, Melanie insisted, her voice remaining calm but authoritative. If you'd like to schedule a separate viewing of similar units, I'd be happy to arrange that for another day. We don't want another unit, my father replied, his voice taking on the sharp edge I recognized from childhood, the tone that preceded punishment for disobedience. Vanessa, we know you're in there. This has gone far enough. The inspector looked up again, his expression now concerned. I gave him a reassuring nod and stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind me. Better to confront them here than allow them to disrupt the entire inspection. My parents stood facing Melanie, their postures radiating indignation. Behind them, a security guard waited discreetly by the elevators. When they saw me, their expressions shifted. My father's to triumphant determination, my mother's to practiced concern. There you are, my father said. This has gone on long enough, Vanessa. We need to talk. We're so worried about you, sweetheart, my mother added, stepping forward with arms outstretched as if to embrace me. I took a step back, maintaining distance. This is neither the time nor the place, I said evenly. I'm in the middle of a home inspection. That's exactly why we're here, my father insisted. This condo purchase is premature and financially unsound. I've run the numbers. He patted his briefcase importantly. Your salary can't support the mortgage payments, especially not with property taxes and association fees. I noticed Dr. Lewis hanging back near the elevators, watching the exchange with professional detachment. The final piece of their intervention, strategy. Medical validation for their claims of my supposed instability. My finances are no longer your concern, I replied, and I'd appreciate it if you'd leave now before you cause a scene. Cause a scene? My mother repeated, her voice rising dramatically. We're trying to prevent you from making a terrible mistake. After everything that's happened, you're clearly not thinking clearly. I turned to Melanie. Would you please ask the inspector to continue without me for a few minutes? I need to speak with my family privately. She nodded, looking relieved to escape the tension in the hallway, and slipped back into the condo. The security guard remained by the elevators, watching attentively but not interfering. You have 5 minutes, I said to my parents, my voice low and controlled. And then I'm returning to my inspection. If you attempt to follow me or create further disruption, building security will escort you out. My father's face flushed, with anger at the ultimatum, but he quickly composed himself, ever mindful of appearances. We've brought Dr. Lewis, he said, gesturing toward the physician. He's concerned about your recent behavior patterns. Dr. Lewis stepped forward, his familiar grandfatherly manner now seeming calculated rather than comforting. Vanessa, your parents have described some concerning behaviors, paranoid thinking, false accusations, impulsive financial decisions. I'd like to suggest a comprehensive evaluation. The audacity of their strategy momentarily took my breath away. They had actually convinced our family doctor to participate in this charade, to lend medical credibility to their attempt to regain control. Dr. Lewis, I said, meeting his gaze directly, are you aware that my parents recently transferred $35,000 from my savings account without my knowledge or consent? That my father forged my signature on bank documents? That they've been financially favoring my brother over me for decades, to the tune of nearly $200,000 in documented differential treatment? The doctor blinked, glancing uncertainly at my parents. They mentioned a misunderstanding about shared accounts. Not a misunderstanding, I corrected firmly. Theft, documented, acknowledged, and now reversed. I have signed statements, from the bank manager and my father's own written admission. My mother stepped forward, her voice dropping to a confidential tone as if sharing sensitive information. This is exactly what we're concerned about, Doctor. These wild accusations, this fixation on supposed theft and favoritism. She's alienating her entire family over imagined slights. The calculated gaslighting might have worked in the past, might have made me question my own perception of reality. But not anymore. Not with the bank statements, the spreadsheets, the signed acknowledgments that proved every imagined slight was documented fact. I can provide copies of all relevant documentation, I said to Dr. Lewis, maintaining my professional composure, the same calm authority I used when advocating for patients, including the police report I filed yesterday documenting their attempt to access my apartment after the locks were changed. This was a strategic lie. I hadn't actually filed a police report, but the flash of alarm on my father's face confirmed it hit its mark. Police report? Dr. Lewis repeated, now looking decidedly uncomfortable. Robert, Diana, you didn't mention. Because there is no police report, my father snapped. She's bluffing. Would you like to test that theory? I asked mildly. I can have copies sent to your office, Dr. Lewis, along with the statements from my colleagues at Memorial regarding your unannounced visit there, demanding to see me against my expressed wishes. The doctor took a small step back, professional caution clearly overriding whatever allegiance he felt to my parents. Perhaps I should review the full situation more thoroughly before making any recommendations. My mother's perfectly composed facade cracked slightly. You can't possibly be taking her side, Richard. After all our years of friendship? This isn't about sides, Diana, he interrupted gently. But I can't make clinical assessments in the middle of a hallway, especially when there appear to be significant factual disputes. The security guard shifted slightly, a subtle reminder of his presence and the potential consequences if my parents continued to escalate. "Your 5 minutes are up," I said quietly. "I'm returning to my inspection now. Please leave the building." My father took a step toward me, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "This isn't over, Vanessa. If you think you can embarrass us like this without consequences—" "The only embarrassment here is your behavior," I interrupted, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "And the only consequences will be the permanent damage to our relationship if you continue down this path." I turned and walked back to Unit 814, closing the door firmly behind me. Through the solid wood, I could hear my mother's protests and my father's demands gradually fading as security, presumably, escorted them to the elevator. The inspector looked up from his notes, eyebrows raised slightly. "Everything okay out there?" "Yes," I replied, surprised to find I meant it. "Everything is fine now. Please continue." The remainder of the inspection proceeded without interruption, the inspector methodically checking every aspect of the condo while I followed along, making notes of his observations. The unit was in excellent condition, only minor issues with one window seal and a slightly loose kitchen faucet, both easily fixable. "Everything looks good overall," he concluded, closing his inspection binder. "You're getting a solid property here. I'll have the full report emailed to you and your real estate agent by tomorrow morning." We shook hands, and he departed, leaving me alone with Melanie in what would soon be my new home. Through the expansive windows, I could see dark clouds gathering over the lake, a storm brewing on the horizon, fitting metaphor for the emotional tempest I'd just weathered. "I apologize for the complication," I said, turning to Melanie. "I hope it won't affect the sale process." She smiled warmly. "Not at all. Family dynamics can be challenging during major life transitions. But speaking strictly as your real estate agent, this inspection report should clear the way for us to proceed to closing as scheduled." After she left, I lingered in the empty condo, walking from room to room, imagining my furniture in my spaces, picturing morning coffee on the small balcony overlooking the lake. This place represented more than just square footage and amenities. It was tangible proof of my independence, a space entirely my own where my parents' influence could not reach. My phone buzzed with a text from Noah. "How did the inspection go?" Parents came back fuming. I replied, "Inspection went well. Parents tried bringing Dr. Lewis to suggest I'm mentally unstable. Didn't work." 3 dots appeared immediately, then, "They what? That's a new low even for them. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I typed back. Better than fine, actually. Standing up to them felt right. On my way out of the building, the front desk attendant, Keisha, according to her nameplate, gave me a conspiratorial smile. "Your parents left about 20 minutes ago. Security made sure they didn't try to come back up." "Thank you for your help," I said sincerely. "I appreciate your discretion." "No problem," she replied with a knowing look. "Family stuff can be complicated. For what it's worth, I think you're going to love living here." Outside, the air had the electric quality that precedes a storm, heavy with moisture and possibility. I checked my watch, just past noon. My shift at the hospital didn't start until tomorrow morning, leaving me the remainder of the day to process what had happened and prepare for whatever came next. I decided to stop by my bank, wanting to confirm in person that my accounts remained secure. Mr. Harrington was in a meeting, but his assistant verified that all changes had been implemented as requested. My parents' access completely removed. Additional security protocols added to prevent unauthorized transactions. "Mr. Harrington also wanted me to give you this," she said, handing me a business card with a name written on the back. "He said you might find Ms. Winters' services useful in your current situation." The card belonged to a family law attorney specializing in elder financial abuse cases, an interesting perspective on my situation that I hadn't considered. Perhaps the dynamics of my relationship with my parents did mirror those cases, with the roles reversed. They had exploited their position of trust, used manipulation and gaslighting to maintain control, and reacted with escalating tactics when that control was threatened. I tucked the card into my wallet, not yet decided on whether legal intervention would be necessary, but appreciating the resource. At a small cafe near the bank, I ordered lunch and finally checked my phone, which had been buzzing periodically. Throughout the morning, 6 missed calls from my mother, 2 from my father, and 1 from Dr. Lewis. The latter a surprise. I listened to his voicemail first. "Vanessa, this is Dr. Lewis. I wanted to apologize for my role in this morning's situation. Your parents presented their concerns in a way that I now realize was incomplete and potentially misleading. While I can't discuss their communications with me due to privacy constraints, I want you to know I've declined to pursue any evaluation or intervention. If you'd like to discuss this further or need a referral to a counselor to help navigate family issues, please call my office." The doctor's retreat from my parents' narrative was unexpected, but welcome. Perhaps presenting the threat of documentation, the bank statements, the security reports, the alleged police report, had been enough to make him reconsider his initial assessment. My father's voicemails were predictably authoritative, demanding we resolve this situation like adults, and warning of irreparable damage to family relationships if I continued my reckless behavior. My mother's messages oscillated between tearful pleas about family harmony and thinly veiled threats about how my actions would affect my professional reputation. As I was listening to the last message, a text from an unfamiliar number appeared. "Vanessa, this is Aunt Lisa. Your mother has been calling family members all morning with concerning claims about your mental health. Many of us are skeptical, especially after what happened at your anniversary dinner. Would you be willing to talk? I'd like to hear your side." The anniversary dinner, my parents' elaborate celebration of their 35th wedding anniversary 3 weeks ago, where they had announced their generous gift to Noah's startup venture without specifying the source of the funds. The event where I'd first noticed my mother's evasiveness when I'd mentioned my down payment savings, the catalyst that had prompted me to check my accounts more carefully. I replied to Aunt Lisa, "I appreciate your reaching out. I'd be happy to talk. Free tomorrow. Evening, if that works for you." Her response came quickly. "Perfect. I'll come to you. Just tell me where." I suggested a quiet restaurant near my apartment, neutral territory where we could speak privately. If my parents were indeed attempting to turn family members against me with false claims about my mental state, I needed to counter those narratives carefully, not with emotional denials, but with documented facts and calm rationality. The cafe was filling with the lunch crowd, conversations and laughter surrounding me as I sat alone with my cooling coffee, contemplating my next steps. My phone buzzed again. "Noah. Can I come over tonight? Need to talk to you about something." "Important." "Of course," I replied. 7 p.m., okay?" "Perfect. I'll bring dinner." I finished my lunch and headed back to my apartment, the storm that had been threatening finally breaking overhead. Rain lashed against my windshield as I drove, thunder rumbling in the distance, nature's percussion accompanying my tumultuous thoughts. At home, I changed into comfortable clothes and spent the afternoon reviewing the condo purchase documents, ensuring everything was in order for the upcoming closing. The inspection report arrived via email earlier than expected, confirming what the inspector had told me in person. The unit was sound, with only minor issues needing attention. I forwarded the report to my mortgage lender, another piece falling into place in my carefully constructed plan for independence. With each document signed, each hurdle cleared, the reality of my new home became more concrete, more irrefutable. At precisely 7 WoW, Noah knocked on my door, bearing bags of takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant. His expression was unusually serious as I ushered him inside. "What happened with Dr. Lewis was completely out of line," he said without preamble, setting the food containers on my small dining table. I told Mom as much when they got back. Dad actually defended it, said they were pursuing all avenues to help you through this difficult time. I shook my head, distributing plates and utensils. Their concern would be more convincing if they hadn't stolen from me in the first place. That's exactly what I said, Noah exclaimed, opening containers of pad thai and green curry. And do you know what Dad said? He said they were reallocating family resources to maximize overall benefit. Like they were some kind of investment managers rather than parents stealing from their daughter. We sat across from each other, the familiar comfort of our favorite food, a stark contrast to the uncomfortable conversation. They've started calling relatives, I told him, serving myself some curry. Aunt Lisa reached out. Apparently Mom's been sharing concerns about my mental health with extended family. Noah winced. I was afraid of that. They spent hours on the phone after the condo incident. I heard Mom telling someone you were having paranoid delusions about financial impropriety. Meanwhile, Dad was in his office shredding documents. Shredding documents? I repeated, alarm rising. What documents? I don't know for sure, he admitted. But I walked by and saw bank statements in the shredder bin. When he noticed me, he shut the door. The implications were disturbing. Were they destroying evidence of other financial manipulations? Previous instances of reallocation that I hadn't yet discovered? I've been doing some thinking, Noah continued, his expression growing more serious, about all those business ventures they funded for me over the years. About how easily they approved expenses that, looking back, were completely unnecessary. Did you know they paid for a luxury apartment in Cambridge when most of my classmates had roommates? Or that my emergency fund in college was replenished monthly, regardless of whether I'd had any actual emergencies? I had known, of course. I'd watched it happen year after year while working part-time jobs throughout my education to cover basic expenses. The thing is, he continued, pushing his food around his plate, I never questioned it. I just assumed that's what parents did. They supported their kids' dreams. But they weren't supporting dreams, were they? They were buying control. Over both of us, just in different ways. His insight surprised me. Not just the realization itself, but the emotional maturity required to acknowledge his own role in our family's dysfunction. They're planning something else, he said abruptly, meeting my eyes. Something bigger than the Dr. Lewis stunt. I overheard Dad on the phone with his lawyer talking about financial conservatorship and documented pattern of instability. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Conservatorship? They can't be serious. I think they are. Dad kept saying that your reckless financial decisions and paranoid accusations demonstrated you couldn't manage your own affairs. The audacity was breathtaking. They had stolen from me, and now were attempting to use my response to that theft as evidence that I couldn't manage my own finances. They won't succeed, I said with more confidence than I felt. I'm a 30-year-old healthcare professional, with a spotless employment record and documented financial stability. No court would grant them conservatorship based on a family disagreement. I agree, Noah nodded. But the fact that they're even considering it shows how far they're willing to go to maintain control. We finished our meal in contemplative silence, the gravity of our parents' potential next move hanging between us. As Noah gathered the empty containers, he paused, his expression hesitant. There's something else, he said quietly. I've been offered a job in Seattle, a real job, not another startup fantasy, research position at a biotech firm, working on medical applications of the algorithms I developed for my master's thesis. Noah, that's amazing, I said sincerely. When did this happen? They called yesterday. I've been thinking about it. Non-stop. He leaned against the counter, uncertainty written across his features. Part of me feels like I'd be abandoning you to deal with Mom and Dad alone if I took it. Absolutely not, I replied firmly. This sounds like a legitimate opportunity aligned with your actual skills, not another of Dad's investments in a dubious business plan. You should take it. You really think so? I know so. We both need to build lives based on our own choices, not their expectations or manipulations. He smiled, relief evident in his expression. I was hoping you'd say that. I already accepted the position this morning. I start in 3 weeks. Something loosened in my chest, a tension I hadn't fully acknowledged until that moment. Brother was choosing his own path, one based on his genuine talents rather than our father's vicarious ambitions. It was a victory, not just for him personally, but for both of us against the dysfunctional dynamics that had shaped our lives for so long. This is cause for celebration, I declared, retrieving a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. To new beginnings, yours in Seattle, mine in the condo. As we clinked glasses, my phone buzzed with an incoming email, the mortgage company confirming final approval of my loan. Another piece securely in place. The storm outside had passed, leaving behind the fresh, clean scent of rain-washed air drifting through my open window. Thunder rumbled in the distance, moving away, like the threat of my parents' control, still present but receding with each step I took toward independence. To standing our ground, Noah amended, raising his glass again. And finding our own way forward. I'll drink to that, I agreed, the sweet taste of freedom mingling with the wine on my tongue. The morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my condo, casting golden patterns across the hardwood floors. 5 years of sunrise views over the lake, and the sight still hadn't lost its magic. I sipped my coffee on the balcony, savoring the quiet moments before my day began. My phone chimed with a video call. Noah, right on schedule. I smiled as his face appeared on the screen, Seattle's characteristic gray skies visible through the window behind him. Happy Liberation Day, Ness, he grinned, raising his own coffee mug in salute. I laughed, returning the gesture. Happy Liberation Day to you, too. It had become our private tradition, marking the anniversary of that pivotal confrontation at Bellini's restaurant, where I'd exposed our parents' theft and begun the process of breaking free from their control. 5 years ago today, everything had changed. How's Dr. Reynolds enjoying her new position? Noah asked, his expression warm with genuine pride. Still adjusting, I admitted. The transition from charge nurse to director of emergency services comes with a learning curve, but I'm loving the challenge. My promotion 3 months ago had been the culmination of years of hard work and dedication, recognition based solely on merit rather than favoritism or manipulation. The salary increase had allowed me to finally pay off my student loans entirely and begin contributing more substantially to my retirement accounts. And how's the brilliant research scientist? I asked. Any breakthrough discoveries this week? Noah laughed, running a hand through his hair. Longer now than our parents had ever permitted when we lived under their roof. Just the usual world-saving innovations, nothing special. His self-deprecating humor was a recent development, a healthy counterbalance to the inflated sense of importance our parents had cultivated in him. The research position in Seattle had evolved into a leadership role developing medical diagnostic algorithms that were already saving lives in hospitals across the country. His work was genuinely impressive, but now it was impressive on its own merits, not because our parents had declared it so. How's Caroline? I asked, referring to his fiancée of 6 months, a brilliant NASA engineer he'd met at a tech conference 2 years ago. His face softened. Amazing, as always. She's in Houston this week for a project review. We've been looking at houses in the Green Lake area. Moving in together before the wedding? Mom would have a conniption, I teased. Add it to the list of disappointments we've provided, he replied dryly. Speaking of which, I knew what was coming. The same question that arose during every Liberation Day call. No, I haven't spoken to them since Aunt Marianne's funeral last year. Noah nodded, his expression thoughtful rather than judgmental. Me neither. Dad sent his usual investment opportunity email last month. I didn't respond. Our parents' attempts at contact had evolved over the years, from the initial aggressive confrontations to more subtle manipulations disguised as concerns or opportunities. My father still occasionally sent financial articles warning about the dangers of limiting portfolio diversity, thinly veiled criticisms of my independent financial decisions. My mother's tactics leaned more toward emotional manipulation, with messages about family events I was choosing to miss and health concerns I was selfishly ignoring. We'd both established clear boundaries, Noah through geographical distance combined with limited, carefully controlled communication, me through more complete separation after their final, most egregious attempt at control. That attempt had come 3 weeks after our confrontation at Bellini's. True to Noah's warning, they had indeed consulted with a lawyer about establishing financial conservatorship over me, claiming I was mentally unstable and financially irresponsible. The lawyer had apparently advised them that such a petition would fail given my professional standing and financial stability, but they had proceeded with a different tactic, attempting to interfere directly with my mortgage approval. My father had actually called my lender, presenting himself as a concerned financial advisor with information about my history of financial mismanagement. Fortunately, the lender had immediately contacted me about the suspicious call, and Mr. Harrington at the bank had provided a strongly worded letter confirming my excellent financial history and explicitly addressing the attempted theft by my parents. That interference with my mortgage, a direct attempt to prevent me from achieving housing independence, had been the final straw. I had sent one last message to my parents, informing them that any further contact would need to be through my attorney, whose contact information was provided. Then I had blocked their numbers, email addresses, and social media accounts. Have you given any more thought to Caroline's idea? Noah asked, bringing me back to the present. About setting up the scholarship? Caroline had suggested we establish a small scholarship fund for nursing students from dysfunctional family backgrounds, using our experiences to create something positive that might help others establish their own independence. I have, actually, I replied. I met with the foundation director at Memorial last week. They're very interested in the concept. I'm working on the criteria now. I'll split the initial funding with you, Noah offered immediately. It feels right somehow, using our own resources to help others break free from situations like ours. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. We were now voluntarily sharing financial resources for a worthy cause, something our parents had manipulated for years to maintain control and foster dependency. Aunt Lisa asked about you again, I mentioned, changing the subject. She's coming for dinner next weekend. You should join us next time you're in town. Our relationship with extended family had evolved in unexpected ways. After my conversation with Aunt Lisa 5 years ago, where I'd calmly presented the documented evidence of our parents' financial manipulation, she had become an unlikely ally. Other family members had gradually followed as the truth emerged through various channels, some thanks to my parents' own self-incriminating complaints about our ingratitude. I'd like that, Noah agreed. Lisa's been great. Did she ever tell you what Mom said to her after they found out you were buying the condo? No, what? I asked, curious. Apparently, Mom told her you were throwing away your future on an overpriced box in the sky, and that your mental instability was making you reject their generous financial guidance. I laughed, despite myself. Well, my overpriced box in the sky has appreciated 22% since purchase, and my retirement accounts are fully funded. So much for rejecting their generous financial guidance. The doorbell rang. My neighbor Emily dropping off her daughter Zoe for our standing Saturday morning pancake date while Emily attended her yoga class. Gotta go, I told Noah. Pancake duty calls. Give Zoe a high five from Uncle Noah, he replied. Love you, Ness. Love you too, I answered, still marveling at how easily those words now flowed between us. A genuine sibling bond that had finally flourished once freed from our parents' toxic influence. I opened the door to find 7-year-old Zoe bouncing excitedly, her bright eyes alight with anticipation. Are we making blueberry pancakes today, Ms. Vanessa? Absolutely, I confirmed, accepting her enthusiastic hug. And I think there might be chocolate chips too if you're interested. Yes, she exclaimed, racing toward the kitchen where she knew the ingredients would be waiting. Thanks, again, Emily said gratefully. She looks forward to this all week. Me too, I replied sincerely. Enjoy your class. As Emily left, I joined Zoe in the kitchen, where she was already carefully climbing onto the step stool I kept specifically for her use. This Saturday morning ritual had begun 2 years ago, when Emily, a single mother working multiple jobs, while attending graduate school, had moved into the unit across the hall. What had started as an occasional favor had evolved into a cherished tradition for all of us. Can I crack the eggs today? Zoe asked hopefully. Definitely, I agreed, tying an apron around her small frame. You're getting really good at it. As we worked together measuring flour and milk, I reflected on how different my life was now compared to 5 years ago. Beyond the professional achievements and financial stability, I had built genuine connections with friends and neighbors, created traditions that brought joy rather than obligation, and established a home that truly felt like a sanctuary. Most significantly, I had reclaimed my relationship with Noah, transforming it from the competitive dynamic our parents had fostered into a supportive alliance based on mutual respect and genuine affection. Our weekly video calls, occasional visits, and ongoing text conversations had gradually healed the artificial distance our parents had created between us. Ms. Vanessa, why don't you have kids? Zoe asked suddenly, her hands covered in flour, as she helped mix the batter. You make the best pancakes and tell the best stories. The innocent question made me smile. Well, I might someday. But right now, I get to make pancakes with you, which is pretty special. She considered this, nodding seriously. That's true. And you get to be the boss at the hospital and help people get better. Exactly, I agreed, touched by her simple understanding of my priorities. After breakfast, while Zoe was engrossed in drawing at the dining table, I checked my email to find a message from the condo association about an upcoming board election. To my surprise, several neighbors had nominated me for a position, citing my clear thinking and fair approach to community issues. 5 years ago, I would have declined immediately, doubting my ability to contribute meaningfully to such a role. Now, I found myself considering it seriously. Another opportunity to exercise the confidence and autonomy I had worked so hard to establish. My phone chimed with a text from Dr. Patel, now my colleague on the hospital's executive committee. Scholarship proposal looks excellent. Foundation board very interested. Let's discuss funding options Monday. Another piece falling into place in my post-liberation life. The scholarship would help nursing students from backgrounds similar to mine, where family dynamics created barriers rather than support. It felt right to transform my painful experiences into something that might ease others' journeys toward independence. Later that afternoon, after Emily had picked up Zoe and I'd completed my weekly grocery shopping, I found myself back on the balcony, gazing out at the lake view that still brought me daily peace. A moving truck was visible in the parking area below, new neighbors arriving in Unit 512, according to the community newsletter. My phone buzzed with a notification, an email from an unfamiliar address with the subject line, Important Family Matter. Please read. The sender was my father's longtime assistant, Patricia. For a moment, old anxiety fluttered in my chest. Was this another manipulation attempt? A health crisis being used to pull me back into orbit? A financial emergency designed to re-establish dependency? I opened the email cautiously. Dear Vanessa, I hope this message finds you well. I'm reaching out to inform you that your father has experienced a significant health event, a stroke 3 days ago. He is currently stable, but facing a challenging recovery. Your mother asked me to contact you as she respects your previous request that communications come through a third party. No response is expected or demanded. This is simply information you may wish to have. Regards, Patricia Wilson. I sat with the news, allowing myself to feel the complex emotions it evoked: concern for a parent who had caused significant harm, sympathy for the health challenge he faced, wariness about potential manipulation, and gratitude for the respectful way the information had been conveyed. 5 years ago, such news would have sent me rushing to the hospital regardless of my own boundaries, propelled by obligation and guilt. Today, I could process it thoughtfully, considering what response, if any, aligned with my own values and well-being. I typed a brief reply. Patricia, thank you for the information. I appreciate the respectful way it was communicated. Please convey my wishes for my father's recovery. Vanessa. Simple acknowledgement without reopening doors I had deliberately closed. My own choice, made from a position of strength rather than fear or obligation. As the sun began to set over the lake, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, my thoughts returned to that pivotal confrontation 5 years ago, the moment when I'd finally said enough to years of manipulation and favoritism. That evening at Bellini's had been just the beginning of a longer journey toward true independence and self-worth. The financial theft that had triggered it all now seemed almost incidental compared to the broader patterns it had exposed. My parents had stolen more than money over the years. They had taken opportunities, confidence, security, and the sibling relationship Noah and I might have had all along. But in their final, most egregious theft, they had inadvertently given me the greatest gift possible, the catalyst to reclaim everything they had taken and to build something stronger in its place. The bank manager's face when I showed him the evidence of their theft had been just the first of many moments of vindication. More important were the quieter victories that followed. Noah's growing awareness and subsequent transformation, my professional advancement based solely on merit, the home purchased with my own resources, and the genuine relationships I'd built once freed from toxic family dynamics. As darkness fell over the lake, I closed my balcony door and moved back inside my home, my true home, earned through hard work and protected through fierce boundaries. On my refrigerator hung the most recent photo of Noah and Caroline, their faces alight with genuine happiness. Beside it was a certificate from Memorial Hospital naming me Director of Emergency Services, and a crayon drawing from Zoe labeled Best Pancake Maker Ever. These were the markers of my real life, not the one my parents had tried to script for me, but the one I had claimed for myself. The journey had been difficult, the confrontations painful, the boundaries costly. But standing in my condo on the 5th anniversary of my liberation, surrounded by the evidence of a life authentically lived, I knew with absolute certainty it had been worth every step. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.